Mentas TV. Keep on watching Mentas TV.
It's even more staggering. There are 250,000 species of plants. That's just incredible, 250,000. And when you look at the animals, it's even more unbelievable. There are, they tell me, 350,000 species of beetles. You think about that? Beetles. Who would have thought that? 350,000. When you look at all the insects, they say it's maybe 900,000 or more, and that's perhaps half of how many that we know right now. So there may be 2 million of these. You look at all the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, and it just goes on, and it's just truly staggering and almost incomprehensible. However, when you start drilling down a little more carefully at this wondrous thing of life on the planet, and you don't have to drill down very hard, there's really a kind of a dark, harsh underside to this. It seems to be a bit brutal, a bit cruel, and not very kind. And it starts, even with the plants, the plant in the field, it grows, it starts extending its roots out, and it goes to its neighbor, and it preferentially takes the water, and it takes the minerals that its neighbor can use, and then the leaves come out and overshadows the plant next to it, and it deprives it of the sun. And this other plant, deprived of its light and its minerals and its water, withers and dies so that the first plant can live. You go, kind of rough for the second guy. And that plant does fine until the locust comes along or the grasshopper comes along and starts chewing it up and eats all the leaves. And the photosynthetic material machinery is gone. That plant dies so that the grasshopper lives. And that's fine until the grasshopper comes along and the rodent grabs it. And it just gnaws it and chews it and eats it while it's alive. It's very cruel, it's very rough, and it just chews it down. And the grasshopper gives up its life that the rodent can live. Rodent scampers onto the house, it's pretty happy, gets ambushed by the snake along the way. You've seen this, all these nature films of the snakes attacking animals and all, it's just pretty grim. And the way they kill them, some with venom, others they wrap around them and squeeze them. You think they constrict them so they can't breathe. That's what I always taught growing up. Turns out that's not true. They squeeze and cause the systemic pressure to go so high that they have heart failure. They die very rapidly of heart failure. And I tell you what, they know it's happening too, because you can measure their stress hormones, you can measure their EEG patterns, and they know they're not volunteering for this. It's a cruel, harsh way to go. But the snake lives, at least for a while, until the hawk gets it, and it starts pecking away and fighting, and finally the snake fatigues, and guess what? Snake becomes dinner for the hawk and his family. And you think, well, at least the hawk gets something out of the deal, kind of the top of the food chain. You know, we have a word for that, the apex predator. Apex predator, you've heard this. And you think they're safe, but you've studied enough biology, you already know they're not safe. There's dozens of viruses and bacteria and parasites that go after the hawk, and it's really not safe either. And it seems that everything, it seems to be the way life works on the planet, that everything that is alive lives by extracting life out of something else. And that just seems very unfortunate, very harsh. You know, we try and come to peace with that and come to grips with it, and we sing songs about it and make up stories, and we talk about the circle of life and the balance of nature and all this. But look, at the very bottom line, it's just cruel and brutal and harsh. It's a survival of the fittest, and that's just the way the world seems to be. Well, into just such a world, another species arose, and that's us, the humans. And we came in against great odds. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are trying to get us, bacteria and viruses and parasites, and not to mention the predators that would love to have you and your family for dinner, and have throughout history done that to humans. And it's not like we escaped the deal either. We're kind of part of it. You know, we got these molars back here in our teeth. You know, they grind the life out of plants so that we can live. And in the front, you know, we've got these central incisors and lateral incisors and these canines. Look, they're not for peeling grapes, right? What are they for? Ripping flesh, and this is kind of who we are biologically. However, we also have kind of a twist. We have the capacity for contemplation and reflection, and we can sort of think about the world and imagine different kinds of world to live in, and give some thought to this. Now, I saw a movie a little while ago, I can't remember how long now. It's Matt Damon, you know this guy, Jason Bourne, all those Bourne movies and all that, and a bunch of others. Have you seen the movie The Wall? Has anybody seen The Wall? Anybody? Yeah. You've seen The Wall? Yeah, it's a pretty good movie. It's not brilliant, but it's pretty good. It's worth watching. Kind of entertaining. Matt Damon is a medieval mercenary. You know this word mercenary. Paid warrior. Whoever pays the most, that's who he goes fights for. And he travels out far to the east to get black powder. This is the gunpowder. It's going to make him a better warrior. And when he travels out there, he finds an extremely advanced, sophisticated, well-tuned army. And the general of that army is a beautiful woman. Well, you know, I don't know how many great armies are led by beautiful women, but it's a movie, so you kind of let that slide. And anyway, you know, even though I'm 63, I still kind of like seeing the young, handsome guy and the beautiful young girl as they kind of do the tension and the dance. They get to know each other. I mean, you know, I did that as a young man. You guys and gals are all doing this now. It's kind of part of life, and you kind of sort of enjoy seeing that. And she talks to him and probes and says, well, what's it like where you're from? What's the world like where you're from? You know, it's kind of what you do. What's your world like? And he says, where I'm from, the strong take what they want. And I thought, oh my goodness, what a tremendous one-line, brutal, harsh statement of reality. The strong take what they want. But it kind of rings true. It passes a smell test. It rings true. And if you think about your own countries and your own lives, this is kind of what happens. You look at the international stage, the way nations interact with each other. The strong have taken what they wanted. But it's not just between nations, even within your nation. Regions compete against each other, and the strong take what they want. And even in the towns and villages. And if you're honest and look at your own family, and even among you and your friends, that's kind of the way we work. Sort of the strong take what they want. But we also have the capacity to contemplate and to think and imagine perhaps a world that is different from this. And indeed, I think in the heart of every man and woman and child, there's this deep longing for a kind of world that doesn't work that way. And I think that's embodied in the cultures all across the world. In some cultures, it's through the myths and legends that we tell, or the stories that we tell. In others, it's in the music that we write and sing. And in some, it's in dance. In some, it's in the theology that they elaborated, the philosophy. But it's kind of there. And I think even in those cultures where it's not as articulated or as well formed, I think it's there and present in all of us, where we sort of have this deep longing for a different kind of world. Now, about 2,000 years ago, the Romans, you're familiar with the Roman Empire, these guys were very good at establishing empire. You know, they went all over Europe, they got halfway up through Britain, they went all around the Mediterranean, and they established empire, and they did what invading armies do. They come in, they subjugate the population, they occupy it, they oppress it, they put in a whole bunch of burdens and taxation, and they kind of obliterate the freedom. And it's a pretty harsh kind of world to live in under domination of an oppressor. And in that world at that time, there was a man born in a little town. He raised up in another little town called Nazareth. You've heard this town, you know this man, you know his name. And exactly who he was before he was born, there's been a lot of debate and discussion about that. And exactly who he was after he was born, there's been a lot of debate and discussion about that. And in fact, who exactly he was while he was living among us, there's been a lot of debate, so there's a lot of confusion now. But whoever else he was at least a man, just like us. He had molars that ground the thing, and he had incisors and canines, and he ate fish, and he ate other meats and stuff. He was not high-born and of great wealth, but he did seem to come with a great deal of strength and power. And we have many eyewitnesses that attest to this. One time he was on a boat with his buddies. Most of his buddies were fishermen, not all of them, but a fair number of them. And they were crossing one of the lakes there, and pretty good sized lake, and it's a lot better to cross it than just to go all the way around, so it's a pretty common thing to do. These were experienced guys, but the weather got kind of bad. Storms kind of come up pretty fast and pretty violent. The waves coming over, very dangerous, and they were just terrified. They realized, oh my gosh, we're in over our head, this thing is about to capsize, and they were just terrified, afraid they were about to die. And I ask you, have you ever looked into the face of a human who's afraid they're about to die? I have, I'm a physician. And you will too at some point in time. And when you do, you will do just what I did and just what this man did. You'll look in that face and you'll have compassion on them. And according to the eyewitnesses, he stood up and in compassion with them, faced the waves and said, settle down. And they say the waves settled, the wind settled, and that they were spared of that. Pretty remarkable thing. He also taught a lot. He had a lot of interesting things to say. And people think, oh yeah, I know what he said. I've heard all that stuff before. You know, do unto others, the golden rule, don't judge people. You've heard all this, right? You've heard this. Kind of be nice, that's what he said. Well, look, a lot of people have said be nice before. It's not like a new idea. Every culture has people that have thought about it and said, it'd be kind of better off if we would be nice. And it wasn't even new in his culture, at least 1,000 years old, maybe older than that. So people don't follow somebody around and listen to them and spend all day hearing them because they say, be nice. So he said a lot of things that were much more intriguing and surprising, and a lot of them just very bizarre things for a person to say. One time he was out walking around, people following him, several thousand, all day long. And they go through, and by the end of the day, they're all starving. They're just hungry, and they can hardly stand it. And I don't know if you've ever looked in the face of somebody who's hungry, who's truly hungry. You may have. I mean, I have. I'm a physician, and you will too at some point in your career. And when you do, you will do just like I did when I see a hungry person, when he saw this person. You'll have compassion for them. And that's what he did. And he called his buddies together and said, hey, we need to feed these folks. What do we have? These guys said, we don't have much. We got a couple of fish, we got a little bit of bread. He said, all right, tell everybody to sit down, line them up in rows, just kind of get them in order there. And he takes a little food that they have, and he goes away and he comes back and he starts handing it out. And according to the eyewitnesses that were there, they said he fed several thousand people and had a large amount of food left over. And that's a pretty remarkable event from eyewitness testimony. But then he said one of these strange things that he was kind of known for. He said, look, you were hungry and I gave you something to eat, you've been fed. Yeah, that's fine. But I want you to know that I really know about your hunger, your deep hunger inside, the longing for understanding and for meaning and for being filled. And he said, that bread that you are seeking of life, that living bread, that's me. I'm that thing you're seeking. Now, you need to think about that. That's a very strange and bizarre thing for one person to look in the eyes of another person and say, I'm that bread of life that you're looking for. Very odd. Another time, he was walking with his buddies. They came across a guy that was born blind. And then apparently a long time ago, the guy was 40 years old. Any of you guys 40? Anybody in here 40? I know our team is. Most of you are just about half that or a little more. Can you imagine 40 years on the planet, never once seeing a sunrise? Sorry, I get choked up. Part of the deal. Never once looking into the face of a mother tenderly smiling at her kid. Have you ever seen anybody blind? Any of you seen somebody who's blind or even born blind? Yeah, I have as well. I'm a physician. You will in your career as well. And when you do, it'll rip your heart out. You will have compassion on them, just like I did, and just like this man did. And what he did, according to the witnesses there, he grabbed up some dirt, spit on it, rolled it up, and put the mud in the man's eyes and told him to go wash. Now, I don't know what kind of medicine that is. I mean, Dr. Gary can tell us if he's seen anything like that. I have never seen anything like that. I don't understand it. But according to the eyewitnesses, he went and washed, and then it came out he was able to see for the first time. And that's pretty remarkable. But then he said one of these other strange things. He said, look, you were blind and clouded, and now you can see, and I understand that. But I want you to know that I understand you really, not just superficially. I know that deep inside there's confusion, there's darkness, and you're seeking for a clear understanding, a clear vision, a clear illumination. And that light that you're seeking, he says, that's me. I'm what you're looking for. And you have to think about this. For one human being to sit there and look at another person and say that, that's a bizarre thing. You know, that's not just be nice. That's something very strange that a person would say something like this. And finally, one time, he has a buddy, friend of his, that died. Been a couple of days, really 4 days. In that part of the world, you go to, if you can afford it, you go to the side of a rock and dig it out a little bit and carve out a little place, all up in clothes, burial clothes, and pack you in there because you know you're going to stink. You know, dead bodies stink. You've seen dead bodies, maybe, perhaps. I mean, I have. I'm a physician. You're going to see them if you haven't already. And they're going to stink after a little while. And he comes up to the grave, and he did just what I did when I saw the casket of my dad when I was a teenager, or my younger brother a couple of years ago. And just what many of you have already done, if you've had family or friends that have passed, he came up to that and he cried. You cry because you have this just horrible, terrible feeling of your heart being ripped out. And the pain is just so raw, and there's no real comfort for it. And if you've not had this, you will. And after that, he came to the man's sisters, the dead man's sisters, and they were crying and in just great grief. And I don't know if you've ever looked into the face of somebody who's just lost somebody they love. I have. I'm a physician. I've cared for patients who have died and then talked with their family. It's just horrible. And you will do this sometime in your career as well if you haven't already. And when you do this, you will do just like I did and just like this man did. You'll have compassion on them. And according to the eyewitnesses, they said he turned over to the grave and looked at it and just said, enough of this, come out. And they said the guy starts rolling out of the grave and he gets up, he's all wrapped up in his clothes. They had to unwrap him because he was all wrapped up. Probably was trying to stink some too at that point, 4 days and all. And that's, again, very remarkable thing that happened. But to me, it's even more strange because what he says afterwards, just like before, he says, look, this guy's dead, we brought him back, and I understand that resurrection. But I want you to know that I really understand you. I know what your life is like, with death hovering over it all the time, threatening to rob you of your friends and your family and produce this horrible pain, and threatening to end your life and render it meaningless and useless at the end. And that you deeply long for a resurrection from that kind of death. And then he tells them, I am that resurrection that you're looking for. That's me. And again, that's just a bizarre kind of thing to say. Well, he talked about a bunch of other things as well. He talked about a kingdom of God that's coming at some point. And this kind of got people's attention because, you know, they're thinking, hey, we could do with the king around here. We need to overthrow our oppressors. We're looking for some freedom. And in fact, his people had been looking for a king at least a couple of 100 years, maybe longer than that. So they're thinking, this guy's pretty powerful. Maybe he's our guy. And they started doing what people do. They started getting together and they go, hey, when he's up there, I'm going to be up on the right side, right there with him. The other guys, hey, I'm going to be on the left. And they started arguing, where am I going to be? Where am I going to be? Because they all wanted to be kind of up there. And so we know that we're thinking this, and he gets them together again, sits them down. And he says, I want you to listen very, very carefully, he says. Everywhere in the world, people act just like you're acting. All over the world. Australia, New Zealand, up through Korea, Japan, Taiwan, China, all across Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, and Arabia, Oman, Middle East, you know, Jordan, Syria, Palestine, Israel, Egypt, all across Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, all across Europe, England, Iceland, all across the United States, all across Central and South America, and back out to the Polynesian. Everywhere on the earth, people are acting just like you do, struggling around so that the strong take what they want. And he said, in the kingdom of God, it's not going to be that way. And it's not going to be that way among you. And that's a very difficult thing to hear. You can hear the words, but I mean, can you really understand that? And to drive the point home, he said, look, have a seat. You know, in that day you walk around barefoot or in sandals, everybody's feet's dirty. Ours are kind of dirty. And you come into a house and the lowest servant has the job of washing everybody's feet, you know. The lowest servant. And so what he does to drive the point home is he gets down on his own knees and washes everybody's feet. So this is the master, the teacher, the leader, the man of great strength. And instead of taking what he wants, he in fact serves everybody. And so when I think of the becoming a great physician or a great person really, the mentor factor, I see no better mentor than that. The true heart, mind, and spirit of a servant, a true servant, not just pretend thinking, but a true servant. Well, he had a few other things to say. He got them together and said, look, I've got to go away. I'm going back to the one that sent me. I'm coming back with the kingdom. I don't know when, that's not my call. Somebody else's call, but I'm coming back. And when I do, I'm going to fix things. And he actually said, I'm going to make all things new, brand new, the whole thing all over again. And as much as I love the beauty of this world and how staggeringly awesome it is, you know, it needs fixing. It really does. We've talked about this. It's just not right. And I didn't have to be 63-year-old to know that. I knew that when I was a young man. I figured that out. And I strongly suspect the majority of you already know that as well. And if you don't, you will soon enough, that it needs fixing. And that's pretty good news that he's going to fix it, because apparently he's able to do what he said he was going to do. He's also going to fix me. And that's pretty good news for me, I'll tell you. At times I kind of pretend like I don't need fixing, you know. Most of us do this because you really kind of want to think of yourself as a pretty good guy. You know, you try and do right and you try and help folks and all. But I know myself, I know my life, and I know its frustrations and disappointments. I know its moral failures, its ethical shortcomings. I know all the failures. We don't ever say the word sin anymore, but I know the sin. And I got to tell you, the embarrassment and the shame, it's not very nice. And you have young lives, and I don't know your lives, but I'm strongly suspicious you know exactly what I'm talking about, even at this age. And I'm looking forward to being fixed as well. I think that's going to be awesome. Well, he gathered together again, and he had another thing to say. He said, all right, I'm taking off. I'm coming back with the kingdom when there's going to be a different way of living. But while I'm gone, I can't believe he said this. He said, I want you to go ahead and get started on this. I want you to go ahead and start living like the kingdom is here now. You saying, really? Are you serious? I mean, this whole world, the strong take what they want. I mean, what chance do we have? I mean, that just can't possibly work. It's just a disaster of an idea to be living like that. And he says, no. Trust me. I know what I'm talking about. He says, trust me. It's better. Not only just better then, it's better now. So he invites everybody to start living that kind of life now in a very hostile world. You think, oh my God, I'm going to swim it upstream, I'm going to be working uphill, it can't possibly be better. He says, trust me, it'll be better. And notice it's a simple invitation. It's not a threat, it's not a coercion, it's not badgering you, it's not humiliating you with shame and guilt. It's just a simple invitation to join a life of service to your fellow man. It's just fantastic. It's a great invitation. And as a young man, I heard that, and I accepted that invitation. I thought, this is really remarkable. And I can tell you now, at the further down the road and closer to the end of life than where you are, that to the extent that I've been able to, which is oftentimes inadequate and incomplete, but the extent that you can accept that invitation, it really is better, even now. It's just tremendous. I can't tell you how much I wanted to share that with you. And how much I hope, and genuinely hope, that it will be of some value. I mean, some real value to each of you as you go through your life and become a greater physician and perhaps a greater person. Thank you. Thank you.